Kahiapo. I'm just really overjoyed to be here and moved that this is finally happening. It's been a dream for a long time. Largely inspired by our halelea kupuna and talking story with kupuna from Anahola to Ha'ena, who talked so lovingly about their ʻOhana aina, but not just about those pieces of aina ever, but the areas surrounding them and their kuleana that came with being parts of those places and holding aina in those places to host people, to welcome people, to care for surrounding areas, to clean the beach, to lend their shower, to lend their phone, to regulate and let people know when they're taking too much fish. To really be the kahu of their place, and also their sharing of how difficult that was becoming on the coast of Kauai, and how much harder it was for them to hold on to their aina and their concerns that they would be able to. So I want to mahalo them. Uncle Sherman's here, and I just wanted to highlight Uncle Sherman, maka you and your ʻOhana, and what a joy it is to go out to Ha'ena and to see you there sitting, welcoming people, playing your ukulele, how foundational you and your ʻOhana have always been to the place and continue to be in the community efforts to care for ke'e and the lo'i there. And it was that sort of thing shared with us, and that's how we started Kipuka Kuleana, to try to help families keep their ʻOhana lands, and in situations where they couldn't, to have hui that come back and care for those places together, so they can always be there, and their keiki and mo'opuna can always be there. And we held a workshop in 2016 and haven't had one since, and are so grateful for Julia Āpa'a, for Dominique's tireless work, and for Oha coming in to join. And also so very, very grateful for this panel of speakers who have always been there to help us on this journey and to help Kauai families. And I want to emphasize too that they've helped us think about the tools that exist, which are being shared with you today, but they've also always helped us think out of the box. And our hope is that this workshops can also bring people together to create new opportunities, new options, because no ʻOhana should have to navigate these issues on their own. And on Kauai, it's gotten harder recently because of COVID. We have low numbers. People want to get away and live in this place. They can work remotely. So there's tremendous new pressure on ʻOhana. So this is an important time. And each of these individuals is so wonderful. We're so grateful to have them in county government. And I'm honored to get to introduce you to them today. The first is Leanora Kaiaokamalies. We think of Leah as a West Side girl, West Side rooted. She also has ʻOhana roots, not only in Kekaha and Mana, but here in Kilauea. She holds her master's degree in urban and regional planning from Manoa. My mom and her were students at the same time, and people were always impressed by her creativity, her problem solving, her enthusiasm, her brilliance. And she's brought that home to Kauai to work as a long range planner in our planning department. I admire Leah so much because she's just so always willing to help. She's so practical, she's so solution oriented, and she never gives up and never thinks anything's impossible. So she's an absolute mana wahine hero to me, and I'm so happy that she could come and join us today. All her GIS skills, all her knowledge, all her planning savvy, and mostly her beautiful ano. So Leah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, I'm so honored to be introduced. Participating technical.
I have to highlight that. We love her son. I got to grow up with Mike Hubbard and have the great honor of growing up with Mike here on Kauai. Mike comes from a family with a long tradition of service to our island. They are absolutely givers and community servants. There's no one more gracious than his mother, Barbara. And you will see his father, Mark, at every event, whether it's cleaning Kalalau Trail, working on Ale Koko Fish Pond. He's one of those people that serves not just by what he says, by what he does. And that's translated to Mike. He truly has such a deep love of our Kauai community, and also has brought his incredible skills home. He's got 9 years now in our county property tax department, and he's the person you go to for help. You go to the counter and you go, "Is Mike there?" And Mike will come out from behind and say, "Oh yeah, come on back. I'll walk you through this. Let's get out my computer. Let's look at my maps. Let's look at the aerial overviews. What's happening with your ʻOhana?" He's so endlessly helpful, so endlessly skilled, with a strong background in real estate and title through his work with Title Guarantee, and just such a humble, giving person. Also a tremendous dad, father of twin girls, a son with his beautiful wife, Liz. Mike is just such a hoa aina, an amazing hoa of this aina, and an amazing, humble, wonderful contributor. And Mike, we're so happy you're making time to do this and bring all your knowledge of taxes on our island and in Hawaii. Mahalo nui. Okay, and then I get to introduce Mason. Gosh, what would we do without Mason? We're so blessed to have you on our county council, Mason. Mason is one of these people who's behind everything. If you look at community efforts like Leadership Kauai, if you look at efforts like getting our keiki out on ropes courses to learn their potential, and then if you look at the longtime community dream to restore Ale Koko Fish Pond, our Menehune Fish Pond, Mason's behind them. He's always behind them quietly. He also is a person who believes in action more than talk. But we're so supremely grateful that in the last few years we've had him on our county council, where he's always really balanced in his perspectives, willing to listen to everyone, and again, a tireless problem solver. What can we do about this? Let's look at what other places are doing. Let's figure out options. Where are the blocks? Really able to work with everyone, really a convener and bringer together of people. And of course, we love your ʻOhana, Auntie Lorna, who feels feeds our whole aina so well, and Malia and your brother, all of your ʻOhana and your keiki as well. The young men you've raised and boys, kaena. Just mahalo for making time to be with us, Mason, and good luck in this election cycle. We know this is a super busy time. All three of you are so busy, and we're just grateful you're with us today. So mahalo. And Leah, I guess I get to turn it over to you. I see Mike and Mason there. That's kind. They're not going to say anything. They're like, "Oh, talk too much about us."
No,
Okay,
it's like, is it time to press the button? Okay.
Yeah, mahalo to all of you for making time to be here today, and all you Kauai people and public.
Really interact with probably the most. But now you're kind of realizing that when you think about property tax, you should also maybe get involved with your general plans and other things that are in the planning portion of how everything is managed. And I just also want to say that we're real Kauai heavy on this for consistency, but all these themes and even that history Leah laid out, like 59 years of planning in Hawaii from 1961, that implies for all the islands. So these same kinds of trends and the sort of ways things are managed slightly differ from county to county, but Kauai should give a great overview even for all of you, those of you that aren't here on Kauai Island. So now, Mike, if you're ready for the Zoom presentation. Mahalo nui, Leah. That was awesome.
Good morning, everybody. And Mehana, thank you for that lovely introduction earlier. That was very sweet and kind of you. And to go off what Dominique said, this is definitely Kauai heavy. And I'm very familiar with the County of Kauai assessment. We do share some computer programming. So a lot of the assessment methods are very similar through county to county, but some of our exemptions and the depth that the county council has gone to solve some of the problems island on island do differ. So just bear with us for our outer island contingent to know that this is, we may not have all the exemptions for Oahu, and Oahu doesn't have all of our exemptions. So without further ado, I'm from the County of Kauai Real Property Assessment Office. I'm the appraisal supervisor. So I'm heavy into finding out the value of properties. And so here's a quick overview of how we do that without getting into too much statistics, and hopefully it'll be easy to understand. For mass appraisal methods, we do about 36,000 parcels every year that we try to solve for the value. And that county code calls for 100% of market value. So for these 36,000 parcels, we can use two approaches that our county ordinance allows for. One is a cost approach. Cost approach is pretty straightforward. It uses the estimated land value together with the replacement cost new less depreciation of a building to arrive at that total assessed value. And then the other approach is the market approach. It's very common to an appraisal that you would receive from a bank or another market value appraisal that you would receive if you're trying to figure out for the value of your land for estate planning purposes or for something like that. And what we use here is we use comparable sales. So we use other properties that have sold in the surrounding area, and then we adjust these sales to the subject property for differences such as date, location, zoning, and that's what Leo was talking about, zoning, land area. We also have the ability to adjust for topography, differences in improvements, of course, including the size of the house, the construction quality, number of bedrooms, number of living units, and other building and yard improvements, such as an example of another building and yard improvement would be a big tool shed, gazebo, things that are not necessarily a living unit. For residential properties, such as just a single family house, typical single family house and a condominium unit, the market approach is generally more accurate to get the total market value. And I'm gonna show you, well, first we're gonna talk about the building block of finding comparable sales is developing the island into neighborhoods. Neighborhoods, they represent properties that share similar characteristics. There are many ways to define neighborhoods, typically geographically, similar size, similar development potential. We have approximately 1,500 different neighborhoods that are established at the County of Kauai. Each neighborhood is assigned a computer-aided land pricing, which is a count model to arrive at an estimated land value. The formula is based off a concept called benchmarking. For example, an R4 zoned land may have a base size of 10,000 square feet, which is a typical lot size in an R4 zoned area, whereas an R6 zoned area may have a benchmark size of 7,500 square feet, which means the parcels located in that neighborhood would typically have very similar sizes, and obviously they're not all going to be exact. The next slide, we are showing an example of CALP models. CALP models are interesting. Definitely, it's a way we smooth out value between neighbor to neighbor, and it's applied uniformly. So in this example, we're assuming a 10,000 square foot benchmark with a base size, 10,000 square foot base size with a $20 per square foot base rate and a 25% incremental decremental rate, or $5 a square foot for the differences between the actual lot size and the benchmark base size. 3 examples of varying sizes lots to come up with the assessed value for the land based off of this benchmarking CALP model theory. Lot 1, very simple, 10,000 square feet. That's a lot size. That's the base size, and the base rate is $20. So we 10,000 times $20, $200. There's no variance, and the resulting value $200,000. Next, we have the neighboring lot, 15,000 square feet, and we're still going to do the base rate, which is $20 times the base lot size, which is 10,000. So we're going to come up with that $200,000, and then we got to solve for the additional 5,000 square feet. The incremental decremental, in this case it's incremental, is $5 a square foot. So we're going to add a value of $25,000 to this particular lot, and it's now has a resulting value of $225,000. Hopefully to hit home, we're going to do what happens with a 75 1,000 square foot lot in the same neighborhood. We've still got to do the calculation of base rate times the base size, which is going to be the 10,000 times $20 gives us $200,000 base value minus our 2,500 square feet at $5 a square foot. It's $12,500. The resulting value of this assessed parcel would be $187,500. We put on here that the unit value per square foot is going to be different, and that's standard with CALP models and this benchmarking theory that we use. But if you notice that the benchmark and the CALP model with the incremental decremental is very uniform. Next, we're going to show you just an example of several neighborhoods within an area. This is from Omao on Kauai, and all the different shades represent different neighborhoods. And again, our neighborhood isn't the neighborhood of Omao. It's going to be that R4 sector. I'm colorblind, but I do know that there's different colors. So it could be a light greenish, yellowish, obviously, and then there's some purples and blues. And those are bigger, larger lots. We have different neighborhoods on the side there. If you can see the screen, we have a V. The V stands for a vacant neighborhood, which means vacant neighborhoods and improved neighborhoods can get different values for the underlying land. On Kauai, we have an FRC water meter charge. It's about $14,000. So when you're all said and done to put in a water meter, if the county of Kauai does it, it's about $17,000 to $18,000. And if you don't have that, if it's a truly vacant with no utilities, you should be paying more money if it has a water meter installed versus a truly vacant piece of or unimproved property. And that's the difference between vacant and improved. We're going to go on market value. What is market value? And what does the county of Kauai call for? Right here in our ordinance, section 5A, 8.1, valuation consideration is in fixing. The director shall cause the fee simple market value of all taxable real property to be determined annually, assessed by market data and cost approaches to value using appropriate systematic methods suitable for mass valuation of properties for taxation purposes, so selected and applied to obtain, as far as possible, uniform and equalized assessments throughout the county. This is our basemark fundamental. In the private sector, it'd be called maybe a value statement proposition. We strive to be uniform. We strive to have equalized assessments throughout the county, throughout neighbor to neighbor, parcel to parcel, and we want to be fair in our treatment throughout the whole island on a parcel basis. Market value, some may ask, what is the definition? Definition in this one is a little wordy, but it's basically what if you put your house property on the market and you're a knowledgeable seller and you get a knowledgeable buyer, nobody's acting under duress. You don't need to sell it. You don't need to sell it tomorrow. Both are acting prudently for their self-interest. That is the definition of market value. One thing I'd like to hit home is the county of Kauai does call for the fee simple fair market value of all taxable properties. Some people may not own the fee simple Hawaiian homelands, for example. They have the 99-year lease. Fortunately, county of Kauai has made Hawaiian homelands non-taxable, so they don't get a tax bill. But if you hold a lease, what you own is not the full bundle of rights, and it's not the fee, it doesn't make up the fee simple market value, but the County of Kauai is valuing each property in its fee simple form. Now we're going to move on to an example. Bear with the dates of the sales that are referenced. It's the same principle and premise that I'll share with you. This was a house that sold for $425,000. Here's basically our comp sales analysis report, where we're going out and searching for other comparable sales in the area. And it's going to pick sales within its valuation neighborhood that has similar land size. The grade that you see kind of in the middle of the page, that's our quality of construction for the house. The subject says subject parcel. It's a grade 4, 960 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom, 2 full bath house. It's going to be comparing itself with itself as comp number 1. It's deeming that the sale of itself was the most comparable, which seems totally reasonable, but we're still going to use 4 other comparable sales in this case. And as you see down below, the very last line says market value. Its concluded market value for the following year was $414,000, even though it sold for $425,000. And that's his assessment ratio that we're going to see here. That was 0.97. We were 97% correct. We're going to talk here about the cost approach. What I was mentioning earlier, it's a grade 4 house. It's an average condition. You could see those pictures. We were going to call that average. And total replacement cost new, $184,200. That's based off of, right now we have Marshall and Swift cost tables. They're the nation leader, and they did a Hawaii state-based manual to do cost of labor and cost of building materials and what it would cost to actually put those 2x4s, that asphalt shingle roofing, the trusses, and what would it cost to build in today's dollars. That was a single wall house. They're saying $184,200 if you built it brand new. Because it's an older house, we're saying it's only 53% good, which means it's 47% depreciated. The resulting total RCNLD is replacement cost new less depreciation. That's going to be $97,626, which is a big difference from what it would cost brand new. And on the right side, I'm not sure, we can see most of it with the pictures they said on my Zoom. The pictures are on the side. When we're reconciling the difference between the two methods, cost and market, we can see the cost value. We have a cost building of $97,600. The land value is going to be the same between the two methods, $213,000. The resulting cost value was $310,731. And the market that we saw from the previous slide is $414,000. As I mentioned earlier, most single-family houses, the market value and what it would sell for, also named market value, is indicative of the our market modeling assessment, which was 414, and it's going to contribute the value, the excess value, back into the building. So you can see our reconciled is at the top of the page, right-hand side, $213,000 for the land, $200,000 for the building, equals the 414. We give some ratios down below. I said we were 97% accurate on that. The date of the sale was 8/22/2014. And you can see there's our data entries. It was a valid sale. It was, sale type was land and building. As we move on, that points us out to data integrity. All the sales that happen on Kauai throughout the year are annually reviewed by the appraisers. Data is reconfirmed prior to validating, putting that validation code on there. CALP worksheets, the computer-aided land pricing worksheets, are reviewed for both vacant and improved properties on an annual basis. Neighborhood codes are constantly being reviewed, modified. Sometimes we combined neighborhoods that are close enough in characteristics, and sometimes we split them apart if there's a very old section of a neighborhood and they just did a tract of land next door where they built maybe 5 houses and CPR or subdivided them off. We might say, since they're brand new houses, that should find its own neighborhood or a different neighborhood. We also run additional queries, tools that we use to weed out market model values when the comparables are not suited. That would speak to us in the form of distance points, or if the field control FCCs are too high. Regression analysis coefficients, what goes in to build the market model, which is a statistical software program, is reviewed for plausibility and amplitude. Ongoing analysis of assessment to sale ratios is something we always look at, especially during this time of the year when we're getting ready to put our new assessed values out. And it's one of the things, even though the topic is real property taxes, and we missed some of the dates that I'm going to share with you next. What we're not going to miss is our December 1st mailer of the valuation of the property. December 1st, we send out an assessment notice to every owner in the county, a direct mailer, and we let them know 2 things. We let them know the assessed value, and we let them know the tax classification. That's a really big mailer. That's the most important. That's the time that you can file an appeal if you need to. And the takeaway from today should be, make sure you look at that assessment notice all countywide. Your assessment notice may be mailed at different times. I think we share Maui counties. December 1st date is when we put it in the mail. Look for those, because when you're calling about your bill, we're actually 8 months too late. We want to be calling in December. We want to be making sure, especially with COVID, people are thinking, oh, the real estate market, or the initial reaction was the real estate market's going to crash. As we've all seen, the real estate market is thriving, maybe not for hotels and resorts, but with the low interest rates, there is still a great demand for your single family residential houses. Again, make sure you look at that assessment notice in December. Now we're going to go on to some of our tax relief measures. The most important one is the home use exemption. It's a one-time application unless the owner moves. It gives you $160,000 off. That's anybody aged below 60. From 60 to 69, you get $180,000, and anybody above 70 and above, it's a $200,000 exemption. May be obvious, but partnerships, LLCs, corporations are not eligible for a homeowner's exemption, but the owners of a trustee, or if you have a estate plan of it, the trustees can file for the home exemption. Additional income exemption. Here on Kauai, we have an additional income. This year it was, if you make less gross income than $77,700, you can receive an additional $120,000 off of your exemption. To quantify that, your tax rate typically for a homestead property is $3.05 per thousand assessed. So if you times that by the 120, that's $366 a year in tax savings. So it's something that is definitely worthwhile to check if you can. Gross income is different, obviously, than adjusted gross income. So it's a common confusion. Our office does have a worksheet, so you can check with if you have a CPA, or you can plug in the tax line items on your tax form. Disability income, there's a one-time declared legally blind, deaf, fully disabled, Hansen's disease, you can get a $50,000 exemption. Totally disabled veterans exemption is a one-time application. The owner occupant pays only minimum tax, and maybe I hope I didn't come off to say only pays $150. Their service was incredible. They are totally disabled veteran. It's for service-related injuries. So I believe the intent was to, they sacrificed, they made some risks for the nation, and they're paying minimum tax, and they could qualify for a lower if they also have gross income of less than the 77,000. Hawaiian Homelands exemption, they're exempt from all real property taxes, but still obligated to pay for the trash collection fees. That's the only thing that Hawaiian Homelands is obligated to pay for. Kuleana exemption, this one may be more focused to this particular group. I'm just highlighting it. Property does not need to be owner occupied, but cannot be used as commercially or as a vacation rental. Requires a letter from ʻOhana showing that the current owner has blood lineage to the original Kuleana awardee. Taxpayer pays minimum tax of $150, and that's a one-time application. People that have gone through it can be tedious to track that. ʻOhana usually helps out, and we actually need the letter from ʻOhana. Safe room exemption. This was we get a few of these a year. We haven't had a hurricane for a while, thank goodness, but there are some requirements. You can get an additional $40,000 exemption if you have a safe room built into your house. Historic dedication must have applied. Dedications are a little different. We need a little bit more time to vet them, so the application date is July 1st of every year. Reapply every year. Property needs to be on SHPTA, historic places. The owner of the property is 100% exempt if you're owner occupied and in the homestead tax class. Otherwise, it should be a 75% exemption. The owner does have some requirements. They must provide visual access from public right of way. But that definitely can help out owners. Very low income tax credit annual application. If your gross income is less than 48,600, these numbers change every year depending on our stats from the housing department. Owner occupant pays the greater of 3% of their gross income or minimum tax. Home preservation limit, gross income of all title owners is less than 100,000. The property must have a prior year taxable of $750,000 or more. Owners must have owned the property for 1 million of 10 years. It must be the only property they own. The owner occupant pays a greater of 3% or of their gross income or minimum tax. This one is really great if you're able to live on the property and you have had it in the family for a while. It's helped out some local families on Honolulu Bay that we hear it all the time. Cash poor, land rich. They want to hold on to the property. It's their only property. They've been able to have a reasonable, I'm saying reasonable tax bill with this program, considering the alternative of a $5 to $7 million valuation home would basically force them to sell the property, and that's what this particular bill is in there. So you're not forced to sell family land or your home. Another great one, especially during this time, if you don't own a property and you don't pay real property taxes and you're renting, If your landlord is giving you what you consider good rent, fair rent, low rent, these are the county's metrics for the long-term affordable rental program. If your landlord's, or if you fall in there, say you're renting out to your mother, say you're renting out to your kid, son or daughter, you can also fit into this program. We require a 1-year lease. The rental amounts cannot exceed the figures on the right, according to the bedroom type and the utilities. If the tenant pays utilities, there's a different maximum rent. If the owner pays utilities, there's different rent thresholds. If you're charging your mother nothing, all we want you to do is come in with a lease and say that your mom's renting the unit, have her sign off on a rental agreement. It needs to be 1 year, and you can get to the homestead tax rate, which I'm going to show you in a second. I'll just highlight, this is a very meaningful program, and each year we get more and more applicants, and it's a really great way that the county council, our office, has been able to find a way to provide targeted tax relief for affordable housing. And that's one of the solutions or problems that we hear all the time, is how can we find a solution to affordable housing? Agriculture dedication, it's for taxpayers with generally 5 acres or more. They file a petition for agriculture dedication for 10 or 20 years. Vacant land is valued as agriculture use rather than its production use or its market value. Home sites within the dedicated lands are allowed, but they're valued at market value. Typically, a home on 5 acres, even though they're doing 4 acres of ag dedication, the home really comprises 60 to 75% of the total property value. Just because, in our view, the County of Kauai, 75% or more is in that entitlement to build that house. So once you've built the house, the valuation is in that house site. Dedicated lands must be in the production as of the date of the petition. There are very onerous rollbacks taxes if the owner fails to agree or to require for the dedication. There are some outs, say that the farmer came in and was farming, but there was a flood, a disaster that came in and wrecked the orchard, the crops, the fields. There are some ways there are some fail-safes in the law that are built in, but if it's just that the farmer couldn't make a go of it and decides, oh, farming's too difficult, the rollback penalties are pretty substantial. So the reason why I'm spending a few more seconds mentioning that is because it is great. It's a great incentive for farming, but you still need to know what you're getting into. And the farm plan that we require, we try to vet it very carefully to make sure that every person that's applying has the ability to succeed and is serious and is not just farming for taxes, which is a common thing that we also see in the office. Tax classifications, currently 10 classifications based off of use. Use is not necessarily what we learned about earlier. It could be residentially zoned, and you could be doing a vacation rental on it. It could be agriculturally zoned, and yet you have a house on that. Whatever your actual use is, it's going to fit into one of these 10 categories. Residential, or most common, that tax rate, most recent tax rate, $6.05 per thousand assessed. Vacation rental, $9.85, that's our second highest tax rate. Commercial, $8.10, industrial, $8.10. Conservation and agriculture were $6.75. Our highest is hotel and resort, $10.85. Homestead is our lowest, and again, from earlier, homestead is anybody that has filed that home exemption. it's their primary residence. Residential investor, 940, that's a second home that's not being long-term rented. That's valued at over $2 million. And commercialized home use, $5.05. As an owner occupant with a valid home use exemption, that's what I mentioned, $3.05 are commercialized home use, $5.05. Commercialized home use sounds a little sinister, but what it really means in most cases is that you have a house and you're renting out, say, your guest house, or you say you're renting out a second unit on your property. That gets you to the second lowest tax rate of $5.05. Homestead, if I'll hit this home again, which has the lowest tax rate, means the property is being exclusively used as the owner's primary residence, where more than one home exists, that all dwellings have an owner occupant or a qualified long-term rental living on the premises. I've mentioned what commercialized home use was. And that concludes my presentation. Wow, that was a lot to get through. I know we were running a little behind, so I wanted to try to get through it quick.
Mahalo nui, Mike. That was a lot of information. We're just going to drive home. We're going to make this PowerPoint available on our website. And we're also, I can see so many ways we can maybe break some of those topics down too, and maybe make some handouts or flowcharts that might be useful. So maybe we'll work with Mike to get those up in the future and keep everyone here on an email list. That kind of blew my mind of things I thought about. I think essentially the appraisal is so important because everything that your property tax does goes off that appraisal. And so there are some good questions that were emailed, put in the chat, texted, and I made a list. We'll go over them at the end of the workshop. So if anyone has more questions, but yeah, that's super interesting. So we have that appraisal, which can vary just depending on the year to year. And then you have the chance to contest that appraisal in December. December, it's not the September deadline, it's December. And that then on top of that, your property tax is based on the different classifications they have, the lowest being homestead, right? But there's also different tax exemptions, and some of them are annual, some of them are one time, some of them dedicate for 5 or 10 years. So once you figure out all those, you can work backwards. But there's all these different factors that affect your property tax. So that was wonderful. I'm gonna pass on. Oh, go ahead.
I want to throw out, it's some people, if they're having specific issues and want to ask questions more privately, feel free to, Dominique can give out all my information, and I'm happy to talk to you. We are public servants, so we work for the community. We don't work for ourselves. We work for everybody. So if you don't feel comfortable in this format, please reach out. And even if you're from Maui, I'm happy to see if I can direct you to a person that you can talk to if it's difficult getting through appointment only in COVID times. Please reach out. And again, we want to make things fair and equitable is the thing. So I'll pass it back off. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Mahalo. I'm going to put Mike's email in the chat since he threw it out there. And if anyone wants any more information, go ahead and just let us know. You can email us after. Email Mike. Thank you. And I'm going to pass off to Kalena, who's going to give us all a much needed break.
Yeah, awesome. Mahalo again, Mike and Leah for sharing and presenting. Lots of really great insight and helpful information. But right now we're actually going to go into a short 5-minute break. And this is just to, go to the bathroom break, get some coffee, tea, snacks, stretch out, and then really digest what we just all listened to. And then in the meantime, I'm going to just be sharing and playing a short video. So once this video is over, I'm going to call you folks back in, and then we'll go ahead and listen to our next presenter. But in the meantime,
you're from the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea. From my head to my toes, I am Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. That's a beautiful song, brother.
Thank you. So he's asking some of the when we perform a song, there's maybe some thoughts to maybe how do you feel the song? Does it connect to any of your thoughts or the topic at hand that we're talking about?
Up until a few years ago, when I would go back to Hilo, my brother and I would go, my older brother and I would go down to Browns Beach and get in the water. And it's so hard to get in the water, especially when you're old and you know your feet are kind of soft and you have to kind of negotiate all that sharp rock. But then you get in the water, right, and the waves are breaking behind you. It's times like this when one of us would almost invariably say, God, it's just wonderful to be Hawaiian, and you just never want to be anything else.
I wonder how long ago the sun rose up from the sea below to shine light upon the sea, giving life to the i'a and the coral reef. And I can't say how long ago, but here's one thing that I surely know: the heavens were here long before us, my friend, and will be long gone before they ever end. From the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea, from my head to my toes, I am Hawaii. I wonder how my life would be if they never came from across the sea. Winds blew the sails, heaven gave him direction, while the ocean, clouds, and birds have to make the connection to the place we call home, the one that we know, the one that fed our people from the young and old. From the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea, from my head to my toes, I am Hawaii.
I think that there's several things that we can do and that we need to do. And it begins first with developing a common understanding among ourselves, preserving our traditional knowledge, practicing it, sharing it with other generations is the first in my mind.
And you can live off of or be guided through your na'au. It changes the prospect of just your everyday routine, you know. Not too many people wake up in the morning and let their na'au decide what's going to happen today.
I wonder if my family will have the things it needs just to be happy. A home they can call their own, where they can tell stories, be able to show how the sun rises up from the sea below, how the heavens give direction so that we can know. From the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea, from my head to my toes, I am Hawaii. Oh, 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 yeah, from the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea, from my head to my toes, I am Hawaii. Yeah, from the earth and the heavens, from the hills to the sea, from my head to my toes, I am Hawaii.
To be who you are. And if we're going to become an independent nation, we better know who we are. And we got to start acting like that. So that's what this place is all about.
Okay, awesome. So hope you folks enjoyed that short little video. Got time to get something to drink and stretch out. We really love if you folks could join us back in, and then we're gonna get ready for County Council Member Mason Chock. So whenever you're ready, Mason, the floor is yours. Mahalo.
Hello, Maikako. Thank you everyone for having me today, and to our presenters. Also tough acts to follow. And as if they don't have any more work that they need, they're always they're willing to share their contact information. So mahalo for your service. I also want to thank Julio Paul, because I think you know, what you folks are representing here, and my hope for the future is that you fill in some of the gaps that I've come to identify as needs to transition sort of what was talked about in the last video we just watched, right? In getting our lahui to be able to engage in the current system that we're in, so that there's preservation for our future. And that requires sort of an outside approach from my perspective. There are a couple other aspects that I think we're presenting here today, definitely within county government, that we can control. I'll be talking about a few of those levers with new legislation. But really, I think when it comes to government, the barrier that I've come to learn in my short time has been capacity issues. So how it is our real property tax or even our planning department on their small budgets and limited resources can actually achieve filling those gaps in getting information and communicating with our public and helping them along. Because as you've just experienced with the short presentations we've had, it's a very complex system from land use into the tax process and valuation process. So as you know what I'll do is I'll kind of talk about some of the bills that have become ordinances within the last term. And as most of you know, we get, as council members, we get a 2-year term, and directly related to real property tax, we're able to pass about 4 pieces of legislation. And that's major because we typically you'll see 1 or 2 pass in a 2-year term. So, you know, this has been something that the council has been looking at. I'll kind of summarize those 4 that are showing up for me, and then focus on 1 or 2 that are really, I think, applicable to this group's conversation and hopefully spur some dialogue. And then also, like, what can we look forward to? What can we do next, right? How can you folks help? And what are the legislative priorities, at least from my perspective, moving forward? So I'll talk about these 4 ordinances. As the first one is Ordinance 1053, which removes the requirement for a homeowner who's participating in a long-term affordable program. Mike talked about the value of that, to submit an annual affidavit confirming that the unit continues on to be rented. Because up to now, what would happen would be that they'd have to come in on a yearly basis to reapply that affidavit to validate that they were continuing in the long-term affordable rental program. Now, it can move toward with the multi-year lease. So if it's being leased for 3 years, they wouldn't have to come back. So it's these kind of small tweaks, I think, that, you know, if we make it easier to not fall out of compliance or with the current programs, it'll keep people from getting increased, you know, property taxes. And as Mike said, the long-term affordable rental tax exemption is one of the big ones. That means even if you folks have, you know, your keiki or even your kupuna living in your home, you can participate in this, and you can charge them $1 a year in order to get into this tax category. Giving away all the secrets, Mike. Sorry, but you know, that's how we can help our local residents to retain some of these benefits. I would really strongly encourage everyone, if you take anything away, is to dive deeper into the home. The property exemptions, no matter what island you come from, because I think those are the means to protecting our people. Ordinance 2795 reduces the inequity of real property tax code. It applies, it's a recent bill that Councilmember Everson and I introduced, and it just gives you another example of how it is, the complexity of our tax code is, and how people can inadvertently fall into tax classifications where they pay more money. So there's, Leah talked about land use, and form-based code is really one of those aspects, mixed use, where you have commercial and residential wanting to coexist, and yet we had no mechanism to decipher that tax, the property tax on that. So they will be paying up to now commercial rates, where they might have the commercial space on the bottom and then the residential or home on the top. So to be able to separate that and have it a more equal playing field was important. That's what this bill attempts to do. It was just passed, so it hasn't gone into effect yet, as far as I know. And just to give you a framework, even though we pass a bill, sometimes it doesn't take effect until the following year, particularly if, you know, our tax deadlines are happening, you know, September 30th. So you might not, even if it gets passed and rules are established internally, you might not be eligible for some of these that I'm talking about right now. But I'll share more about that. And really, I think what we're looking at is how do we look at the complexity of all the 10 classifications and ensure that we can carve out ways for our residents to have a fair shot at the right, property tax rate that they're supposed to have. The Ordinance 1044 was one that we passed that approves the owner, the exemption if you are a co-owner occupant. So if you have a relative or someone who was an owner that is now deceased, it actually provides a retroactive, I think up to 3 years for you to fall back into the right tax category. Because oftentimes, especially for a kupuna, right, they'll have one person on record as owner. The wife or the husband is not on the title. They pass away, and then automatically now they get shifted into a different tax category. So this allows for those situations. If you come in and say, hey, why am I paying this? You know, we had all of this home exemption, tax exemption for these past years, and now I don't get any more. We'll actually correct that. So that's 1044. And then the one that I wanted to focus on was a bill that I've been working on actually for a few years, that really started out with my interest in why many of our residents who are kuleana land awardees were not getting their rightful kuleana tax exemption, which is overseen by ʻOhana. So ʻOhana, as Mike had mentioned, oversees this. They validate whether or not that kuleana exemption is intact based on your ability to prove your relationship to that land and to your ancestors who came from that property. And I guess to back up, you know, to understand that, one, there's kuleana, you know, there's the Act of 1850, which was a carve out of, I don't know, 28,000 acres or so, right? I think we ended up with 7,000 somewhat properties or awards rather that went out. But that was just a small piece of what was talked about with Leah in the Mahele, right? So not so much went to Makainana, but the Act of 1850 tried to correct some of that by opening it up. Most of it, the land awards, right, to ali'i and to government. So when people talk about, oh, you know, I live on I have a land award, I have a royal patent, they may not necessarily be a kuleana. And so I think there's a differentiation that needs to be made there. So in my interest in trying to get people into the right, you know, into what they're meant to have a benefit from, I ran into some blocks. and the main one was that, you know, ʻOhana is a state-run organization guided by HRS that gives them the right to oversight over this process. Even though ʻOhana turned over the tax collection pieces of it years ago, how can we ensure that we can get more people into the exemptions that we're looking for? And what we were seeing were because owners or family members were not able to connect themselves to the owner, they were ending up in higher tax brackets than even our lowest tax bracket can offer. So instead of being in the homestead, which is our lowest tax bracket, they'd end up in residential because they cannot make a connection to the owner. Or they'd end up in residential investor, which is in an even higher rate. And we're talking double the rate, and in residential investor up to triple the rate. So, you know, what I did is because I wasn't able to actually change HRS and the oversight of of the process, the verification process. What I've attempted to do through Ordinance 1057 is to create an avenue, an additional route that if you can connect yourself to and have some documentation on our end at the county level to the people on title, or even if it's a clouded title, if you can make some correlation, then we will give you the lowest tax bracket, property tax rate possible. So it provides landowners and the homestead tax exemption to be achievable when the clouded title cannot identify with the home occupant as a true owner. So what it does is it changes the tax definition to create a partial definition of owner. So that includes a family member or owner of our property, of the owner of the property, and would enable the family member under certain circumstances to be assigned a real property tax classification that applies to the family member's use of the property and apply exemptions based on the family member's personal eligibility. This definition of owner is only intended to facilitate payment of real property taxes, not meant to actually serve as a means to identify ownership. All right. And so I wanted to kind of walk you folks. I have an older presentation we used for this. So I'm just going to share my screen. You get to see my crowded desktop, you guys, sorry. But I think it's, no, not that one, sorry. Okay. Can you folks see that? My screen, I cannot tell. Okay. So just a real brief overview of what Bill 2756 does. And by the way, this bill actually just went online, I think, October 1st. Mike, you might be able to qualify that for me. But that was what the bill that we passed identified as a starting date of October 1st. So what it does is, I said before, seeks to help family members living on a property in two circumstances. One, when the owner of all owners on the title are deceased and the family has not yet finalized formal proceedings to transfer title, right? Or two, when no property owner of record has been established, but someone demonstrates that he or she is a family member of the likely title owner, all right? So here we go. So here's the scenario, right? Owners are identified, but not all owners are deceased in the first scenario. The person connected to the property is the family member of the deceased owner, all right? And then they become eligible for that last box there on the very bottom, which is the homeowner's exemption or related exemptions. Kuleana land exemption is the other means, right? So we don't supersede the Kuleana land exemption.
This is a good one.
But what it does do is it allows sometimes, in our cases, families who have been building up taxes because they're in these high tax brackets to actually find some relief in order to get a pause, get to a lower tax bracket, and then start to build towards, building that lineal descendant requirements that's being requested by OHA. The other scenario is no identified owners in the clouded title. All of us are kind of aware of what we've seen with that happen over time. And this one connects, person is connected to the property, is a family member or living of a living or deceased person with potential claim to the property. So that's pretty broad, right? It's just a potential claim to the property. If you say you connected to this somehow, just show us your mo'oku'ahau, and we can work towards that end for you. So, and then the other one that is not applicable is that the owners are identified and living. Of course, that's just a no-brainer. Move to the next one slide here. So I'll just run through it real quick. Step one is, right, what is the status of the property? The property's formal ownership, right? And we talked about the two different ways. Step two would be what living person is connected to the property. Is it a family member of the deceased owner or a family member of a living deceased person with potential claim to the property, as we discussed. And then step three, we need to consider the family members as the owner for certain real property tax purposes only. Again, this is merely to get us into lower tax brackets. Here's an example. I was gonna talk about some real examples, but but I think this one is without saying names, walks us through it pretty well. So example one is grandparents own their home. Both grandparents died without a will or wills or cannot be located. And then the grandchildren, right, continue living in the home, or maybe it's like a couple generations, like Pilika was asking. The grandchildren are not on the title, so that they cannot be considered owner occupants for the homeowner exemption. However, grandchildren also cannot afford formal proceedings and/or proceedings that are pending, right? And that's what's happening, is like this stuff costs so much money just to process, to clear these clouded titles. So the grandchildren wish to pay the real property taxes to keep the home in the family. So Bill 2756, or I don't know what ordinance is this now, 1057, could reduce the family's tax bill by nearly half, from residential, which is 605, to homestead 305. All right, some families could even move from residential investor, as I mentioned, from 805 rate to homestead. And then the grandchildren will have some tax relief paying for the home while pursuing formal proceedings. And then the other example, and I'll get through this pretty quickly, is, so same circumstances, example one, grandparents own the home and die without a will. Grandchildren continue to live in the home. This bill allows grandchildren to be considered owner occupants of the home for the homeowner exemption if the applicant grandchild meets low income criteria and other tax relief is available. And so once they can, basically, once we can get some kind of ownership connection to the property, then we can really start to get into some good property tax breaks. Okay, last one, similar example, grandparents live in the home. Grandparents are low income and elderly. One of the grandparents died, the other remains living. Only the deceased spouse was on the title though, right? Like, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. The deceased spouse will not have a will, does not have a will, and cannot be located. The surviving spouse cannot be considered an owner occupant for the homeowner exemption. The surviving spouse must pay the residential or residential tax investor tax rate. So the surviving spouse also loses the income and age exemptions, which are only available to those with approved homeowner exemption. As a family member of a deceased owner with this ordinance, it would allow the surviving spouse to be considered the owner. All right, thus taking advantage of these exemptions. I'm not gonna go through the rest of them because I think I got like a couple more. What I wanted to do is to kind of move out of this and just talk about what's the next steps, at least for Kauaian. You know, similar initiatives can be I guess gained from other counties. I've been working with Maui County, for instance, and Hawaii County at moving a similar initiative forward. But what can we look at next? Hopefully, if we're allowed in the next term, we're already looking at how to mitigate vacant property taxes, vacant property owners. We know most of the vacant properties on island are speculative, and or often speculative, and we're encouraging, because of our housing crisis, to actually move the needle in a different direction. So we're looking at how it is we can create a tax on vacant properties. The next one is that we're looking at is back taxes on forgiveness on these land awards. So what we were starting to find out was that they're kind of, these people who are kind of like in this weird place, you know, of having these back taxes and not being able to pay for them, and then having to, and then do they get, you know, penalized, or how do we act on them? And so my hope is that we can look at how to address that in the future. And these are, again, just my own personal sort of things that I'm looking at. There's been a lot of talk about tiered classes, tax classes, or subclasses. I know Mike might be like, oh no, here it comes. But you know, we have a pretty complex tax system as it is. In order to be fair and equal, we really need to be able to get to these individual needs and these kinds of stories that we run into. And I believe it's through being able to provide different levels within each tax category. So if you know, the bottom line is all of this sort of tax reform that we're looking at requires manpower, and it requires the technology to support the system to support it. And those are big, high ticket items that we need to consider moving forward. But it's worth our investment. I think one of the reasons why is, you know, at the county level, it's like the closest to the people, and it's really our only means at the county level for bringing in revenue. So it behooves us to work really closely in order to address the kinds of land uses that Leah talked about that we want versus the kind that we don't want. And that to me, that the tax system can be a means to achieving that. So that's it. That's all I have.